welcome to Two Steps Ahead Podcast. Two Steps Ahead Podcast, highlighting the stuff we've stepped in so you don't have to, at least hopefully you don't. My name is Son Edom, alongside somebody who is transitioning. OMG! Tara Hochshiro.
Hey guys, welcome back. It's so good to see you again.
Hey, so you're transitioning. Scandalous. So what we're going to talk about on the show today is just that, ideology transition.
Ideology? That's how you're going to label ideology transition?
I don't know. It just sounded like it was something good. Intelligent.
Yes.
No, basically, so we've come to this day and age in society where we have to have a point, we have to take a side, we have to have an opinion, and it's only one opinion, and we have to vehemently disagree with the other opinion from people on the other side. Bastards. And that's it. That's where we've come. There's a definitive line down the middle, and we have to choose a side. Basically, it's civil war. Mm-hmm. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to have a discussion about maybe breaking down that wall and breaking down that the idea that you have to have an opinion, and it has to be of a certain opinion. Why can't it be in the middle? You know, we've always talked about how there's a lot of black and white, or people want to be black and white, but there's always a lot of gray.
Yes.
And so we're going to live in the gray.
Yes.
Today. And this is something that Tara has been dealing with as far as social media, putting some things out there, talking about some things, getting some responses and stuff like that. And so it's something that we want to try to just share from her experience and see what comes of it. And I followed along a little bit. I did not participate in the conversation as far as from your social media, but I did follow it, so I know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so what I guess the first question would be, give us a little bit of background about what kind of the concept. We don't really have to go into the too much specifics if you don't want to, as far as the finite details. But basically, you posted something that got a varied amount of response from both sides of the table on the opinion. And then at the end, it was basically civil discourse of opposing views that came together and tried to have a dialogue without name calling, without blocking their friends, without unfriending people. And it seemed to be civil, at least the public version of it. I don't know if you got some stuff.
I did not get anything privately.
Yeah.
It was all public, and it was all very civil.
And so how do you think it went?
You know, I'm really proud of my friends. I don't agree with everything that they were commenting on, but I'm very proud of the comments that they were, like you said, they were all civil, they were all respectful. And I did not, so let me back up just a hair.
A gray hair?
Yeah, they're starting to come out again. The salon opened for a short time, and now it's closed again, and now my grays are coming back again. So let me back up just a hair. I don't know if you guys experience this or not. You can comment and let me know, you know, once you've watched the show. But I am constantly questioning why I am posting on social media, what it is that I'm doing. Now that we have a podcast, we have commented and joked before that I'm the one that likes to plan, likes to have a strategy, likes to know what we're doing. You just want to hit the record button and start talking, right?
That's pretty much it.
And so it's a good blend actually, because we bring each other, you know, towards the middle. He keeps me from getting stuck, and I keep him from going too far too fast. And so so far it has been a really good balance. But and I kind of want to bring up a couple different topics in this podcast. One of them is, you know, like I said, what it is that we're doing and what it is that we're bringing to the table. And then the other one, the back story, or the underlying second story, I guess, would be that when you start off doing something, you never do it right the first time around. So I always, when I talk about our podcast, I tell people that, it's kind of like being in the first season of Seinfeld. I don't know if you've ever watched the first season of Seinfeld, but it's awful. It's really awful. Like, everybody's flat. You know, towards the end of Seinfeld, it is hilarious. The characters are fully fleshed out. Kramer is nuts, and George is always yelling, and his parents are always yelling, and Jerry's like, ah, ah, you know, he has that way of talking, and it's funny, right? But in the first season, I don't even know how it made it on the air the second season.
So who are you and who am I in Seinfeld?
I'm
before we get to the meat of it, since I need to check this out. I need to investigate this. Am I George the Yeller? Am I Seinfeld?
I think you're probably you're kind of a George Kramer-ish
combo
blend.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of a Jerry, like sitting back, like watching all the shenanigans around me, kind of, assessing and trying to, put it all together and then have some fun in there, whatever. So having said that, when we started off doing this podcast, we have this tagline, highlighting the stuff that we've stepped in so that you don't have to. It's been working really well. We're in episode, what is this? 38. This is 38.
38.
So now my planning brain is back in gear and I'm thinking about what is our brand? Where are we headed? Is this compelling enough? Who are we, as people coming to, I worry about, I know you don't, but I do. These things keep me up at night. And I'm just like, what are we doing? What are we accomplishing? Is it compelling enough? And who are we as characters and who are we as people? What are we bringing to the table? And so I've been kind of in overdrive, especially in this environment. Especially in this environment. And so to set the stage, we're in the middle of COVID. We are in the middle of, civil unrest, of all the racism that still has not been taken care of. The economy is bad. Things are closing down again. Jobs are bad. It's just a really bad time all the way around, right? So there's a lot of depression. There's a lot of things going on in our society. And so I'm thinking about, what is it that we're doing and what is this that we're trying to accomplish? And my views are changing on racism. My views are changing on the illness. My views are changing on, politics. We're also getting ready for another election and my views are also changing on that. So for the record, I've been a registered Republican. Now I'm just questioning everything. Like up is down and down is up and left is right. And everything just feels like it's backwards. And I'm having to really stop and say, okay, well, what are my values and what do I believe? And I'm just like so confused. And so I've been trying to figure out like, I don't want to be someone who has the answers. I don't want to be someone who just, another podcast that, we just put out our opinions. I'm a person who, struggles. Like I'm constantly questioning things and I'm never quite settled in any one area. As soon as I get an answer, then I'm on to the next, like, okay, well, what about this? And what about that? And so I've been thinking about these issues of like all the issues, politics, like abortion and, gun control and, why people are so invested in Trump or, and people who are, are Christians and say that they're following him, because of his Christians. And then there's all these antics. Like I just get so confused. And I look at a lot of these issues and like, it just is not black and white to me. There's a lot of issues that in the gray area I think is where understanding comes from and is where, we're going to get things done and be cooperative. But things are so polarized right now. And I have often felt like I don't have a voice. I don't know how to jump in because as soon as we do anything, like as soon as we post on social media, as soon as we have a podcast, as soon as we write a book, the experts will tell you, you have to come off like an expert. You have to, have an opinion and take a position on something, see a problem, solve the problem, see a need, fill the need, right? And so it puts us in this position of feeling like we have to also have an answer. And then what we have right now in our society is like millions of people who have the answer. And everybody has an answer and everybody's opinion is right and you're wrong. And there's no conversation to break this down. So I'm thinking about like, okay, how am I navigating all of this confusion? And I put a question on my social media the other day and I said, I don't understand. I'm so confused, I guess is how I put it. I'm so confused by Christians who say that Trump is a Christian or they'll vote for him because he's quote unquote Christian. And I've had people say that to me. Well, I don't really like him, but he's Christian, so I'm going to vote for him. Or then there's evangelical leaders that'll say, we have to vote for the values, the Christian values. We're voting for him for the Christian values. In the meantime, he's, tweeting all these things and saying all these things. A lot of times it just sounds really ugly. And I get confused because nobody, like the Democrats obviously call him out, but the Republicans, like he can do, no wrong. And so I put this question on my Facebook and a lot of people responded. And again, they were very respectful. They were very, they just said, their reasoning. I didn't question anybody. It wasn't my intent to have a debate. So there were things that they said that I disagreed with, but I didn't put it there to have a debate and to have a right answer and like I'm right and you're wrong and vice versa. I just wanted to give people a safe space to put it out there, and they were very respectful. And so what I learned from that was I don't have to have, in order for me to engage in the conversation, I don't have to have answers. I can ask questions. Because we see in social media, like people just put things out there, and myself included, like, okay, well, here's the answer. You just need to read the Bible, or you just need God, or you just need to be a Democrat, or you just need to be a Republican, or we put a Bible verse, or we put, whatever. And what is, a quote, and what is it that we're really helping people by doing that? And are we really like, and we come on here in the podcast and it's like, okay, so I can sit here and have the answers, but is that really helpful? And so what I realized through that is that I can ask questions, and I can spur the conversation that way and get us all thinking that way about what it is that we're really doing. So like for abortion, for example, some of the people respond and they say, oh, well, I'm voting for Trump because of Christian values and because I need to save the unborn babies. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what if somebody's reading that says, what if somebody saw that and they say to themselves, okay, that's all well and good. You're against an abortion. But what about, and I'm just putting myself in someone else's shoes right now. When I was pregnant and I was, in a spot where I didn't have financially, I couldn't support the baby. I was in a relationship that was not good. I would have been kicked out of whatever. I would have been shamed. My life would have, all of these factors that come into play when someone is deciding whether or not to terminate their pregnancy. And if someone is coming through that mindset and looking at this post, it seems uncaring. It seems hateful. It's like, okay, yeah, great. I know that having an abortion isn't right, but I'm in a spot that is not, unless you're going to volunteer to adopt my baby, like there's nothing, I'm stuck. Like there's nothing that I can do. And so my heart goes out to that person. My heart goes out to the person who is in a position where they feel like it's just a no-win situation. It wouldn't, not to say that abortion is okay, but we just don't have the conversation to allow for people to be in that position. And then the other commenters were saying, oh, well, Trump, he says a lot of things that I don't agree with, but we all make mistakes and we're all, none of us are perfect. And I'm like, yeah, but then when you talk about abortion, it's just very cut and dry. Like, no, don't do that. And if you do that, then you're out. There's no like, oh, well, everybody make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. We don't allow that dialogue. And that's where I get really confused by this polarizing, because once we jump on a bandwagon, whether it's to wear a mask or not wear a mask, or vote for a certain candidate or not, or to, socialism or not, or abortion or not, we're on the polar opposite side. And we don't have any real conversation that creates real change because we feel as if we have to have an answer or support an answer. And then if somebody doesn't agree, we have this argument and it doesn't get us anywhere. And I find that so lonely, so frustrating. And it makes me feel more isolated. And so a couple of people said, gosh, I'm so glad that you posted that because I want to post that. I have the same question, but I'm afraid to because people are going to attack me. So I'm just kind of going through this. I know I put a lot, out there, like you could jump in a million different places, but, I'm just going through this, like I'm at the point where I don't want to be another mouth. I don't want to be another person who comes out and says, I have the answers, or I know what's right, or I have the truth. Like, can we look for the answers? Can we look for the truth? Can we just ask questions so that we can have everybody on the table in a safe place and then decide what is the best way to go rather than yelling each other from the opposite sides? Is that even possible?
A couple things come to mind. First off, I think that social media is not the place. Like, you have maybe a rare experience in your conversation and in your posting and the dialogue that went back and forth. That's rare and uncommon, because most of the time you're going to have attacks and, people just put stuff out there. So I don't think social media is the platform for the conversation. And so I think a lot of people try to make social media the platform, and I just don't think it is. And then two, we've talked about in the past, influencers. We've talked about in the past, what society dictates. We talked about it with college students coming out of college, and you've got this board, and this box is on the whiteboard, and we have to live inside this box. Mm-hmm. But yet there's this whole whiteboard outside the box that we can paint our canvas on of life. Mm-hmm. And I think that we don't do that. We try to live by conformity in the box. Like you said, you don't want to be attacked. You don't want to have people come after you. You want to maybe fit in. You want to maybe be accepted. And so we live in this box. Mm-hmm. The other thing, too, is that we have to keep in mind that everybody does have an agenda. A lot of people have an agenda, and that agenda is what drives people, mm-hmm. And so when you have a conversation about something, and then their agenda or what they've been told because of agenda is what they're going to respond to. And they're not going to share, in my opinion, their true feelings because of this agenda that they got to serve. So, for example, you take the abortion. Okay. Now, if you're of a religious person, believe in the Bible, obviously you're going to have a hard line no to abortion because would be deemed anti-biblical. If you are a feminist, you would take a hard line yes to abortion because that's the agenda of that side of the aisle, because we're talking basically about two sides of the thing, and we want to be in the middle. And so it depends on what your agenda is and what side of the aisle you are on. And then the other thing too is that, there's the perception. Okay. So now you have maybe parents who have the perception that their son or daughter, at a young age maybe, or any age for that matter, but, you have an unwanted child, let's use the teenager, pregnancy for this moment. And so now you have, what's that going to look like to the family and things like that. So everybody has an agenda of sorts. And what we miss out on, I think, is the person. Mm-hmm. What's the person's experience? I can't tell you how many times that somebody has done something. Maybe they've gotten pregnant as a teenager, and then you come to them and say, you shouldn't have done that. Well, no kidding. I mean, that's like the most or the least
helpful thing
to say ever. You shouldn't have done that. Okay, we all know that. Or you were speeding and you got a ticket. Well, you shouldn't have sped. Mm-hmm. Okay, we know that. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the dumbest thing to say. And so instead of coming up and supporting whoever it is or whatever the topic is, we want to sit there, we want to have a stance, and we want to be judgmental about that stance, and we want to be right. We don't like to be wrong. People don't like to be wrong. And so what it comes down to, after listening to kind of what you say, is I think of science. When I did pay attention in science class and we did experiments, you looked at everything, mm-hmm. and then you formed a hypothesis. Mm-hmm. I think this is what's going to happen, mm-hmm. or this is what I think. Then you do your experiment, mm-hmm. and then the science, so to speak, the experiment will dictate then the result. Mm-hmm. And you're like either right, close to right, wrong, and you have the outcome. And I know life sometimes we feel like we can't do that because we have to know. And sometimes we can't afford time to do experiments and kind of do that. But I think that that's kind of what I hear you kind of talking about. That comes to mind is like, we need to sit there, we need to take a look at everything that's going on and in each circumstance. And we need to realize. So you take your posting about the president and beliefs and what people think about him, and I think for those people, there's validity in everything that they say because that's what they believe, do they believe that he's a Christian and therefore that's why they should vote for him? Well, yeah, they probably do. Are there things that he does that is wrong? Yeah, of course. Is there an alternative to him? No, because the next person is going to be just the same because there's people that can point out the same thing for the next guy.
And just for transparency, I'm not a fan of Biden either. Yeah. I'm not saying one over the other is better. No,
you just use him as this example.
But I'm confused why people don't. So the bigger thing is that I'm confused why on each side, no matter what the topic is, it could be a vacuum cleaner. There are pros and cons to everything. Everything has a pro and a con to it, right? And when we talk about a lot of these big issues, even the little issues, but when we talk about a lot of these big issues, it's all the pros, right? All the benefits, all the values, and then we ignore the cons. And we do that in marketing. People that we were trained, there are certain marketing circles that we are trained to overcome the no. We don't engage in understanding necessarily, but we overcome whatever objection they have, right? And so we're so trained to put out the positives and to champion the positives and to champion one side of it, that when we are not humble enough to list out the cons on our own side, to me, it completely devalues the whole argument. And I get really lost in that. I'm wondering why we are so afraid to say, here's the pros of, some of the people that posted the pros of Trump were he's, he passed a certain act, or he did trade things with China, or I can't remember what they said. So they were naming out the pros that he has done. And then the cons, they were just we all make mistakes and he's not perfect. We kind of gloss over that. Okay, well, he's mean to people. He puts out these tweets that are derogatory a lot of times and that are, whatever. So I'm not saying to demonize the guy or anybody. I'm saying, why are we not comfortable, even in ourselves? Why are we not comfortable to list out the pros and the cons? Because even in the campaigns, we haven't really started the campaigns because we've been so knee deep in the virus and the racism and all that kind of stuff. So soon, I think the two conventions I think I saw on TV, it advertised in September. I think the two conventions are coming up. But, so we haven't really seen a whole lot of political commercials and that we typically see, but they're coming. And every time we have a campaign, it's okay, if you and I were running for president, the typical standard, the typical model would be my commercials are going to be all about everything that you've done wrong. And your commercial is going to be all about everything that I've done wrong. Please explain to me how that's helpful to us, the American. How am I supposed to? Why can't we not be brave enough to list out our own pros and cons?
Well, I think you mentioned it when you touched on it early on, because we're conditioned that way. We're conditioned, in radio advertising, your job begins when the person says no. If you walked into a furniture store and you wanted them to advertise on a radio station, for example, and they said yes, hey, great. But when they say no, and most of the time people say no, that's when your job begins to change that.
Right.
Like you said, when you write a book, and that's, the number one thing in any type of advertising, here's the problem. We've got the solution. And then you have competitors. Okay. So 2 shades of lipstick or 2 different brands of makeup. Why ours is better than yours? It makes your skin more natural. It's better for you. It comes off easier at night. Then you have to compete against each other because you want people to buy your product.
And I be alarmed that you know those things?
No. I'm well versed in a lot of things through my years in radio. And so,
maybe I need to ask you about products.
Yes. And so, and that's the thing, you walk down the mall and you've got this store with makeup and that store with makeup, and they're competing against each other.
Right.
And I think that's what we become. We become conditioned to that, where that we don't have the ability. It seems odd and it seems out of place if we're
real.
Yeah, if we do something. I mean, we put people on a pedestal. That's the other thing. And we think these people can do no wrong. And then when they do something wrong, we have to come and defend them. I mean, right now we are in a huge culture of blaming people for everything they've done wrong.
Right.
And the people that are accusing the people of doing wrong things hundreds of years ago are doing wrong things themselves as they protest what the wrongdoings were. Okay. If you want to be honest and real, whether you agree with it or not, another story, but the way they're going about it, wrong. And so they don't want to admit that. And so that's what we become. We become where you're wrong, I'm right, and the way I do it is right, and because that's how we're conditioned to it from day one in a consumer driven society. And I think that's hard. That's part of the culture that needs to change. The culture that needs to change is that it's okay to, but we don't want to accept our failures either. You know, we talked about it on the last podcast that oftentimes we learn best from our own failures.
We do.
And so if we're not going to acknowledge that we failed and we're not going to acknowledge our cons, how are we going to improve upon them? And I don't think people like to acknowledge their cons or their failures because then they feel like a failure because society says you failed.
Or they feel weak, or they feel, vulnerable to the point that, and the other part of it too, I get it that like if we admit our weaknesses and we admit our failures, if we're all transparent enough to have our pros and cons list, we don't know if the other person that hears that, if they're going to be safe enough, because people will use it against us.
Of course.
And so we want to hide what we did wrong. We want to hide our cons because we don't want it to be used against us. We don't want to look foolish or weak or silly or like that we're incompetent. And so we hide them even more. But I just feel like we've gotten to a point that everything is fake. And on both sides of the aisle, people are saying, I just don't know who to trust anymore. I don't trust the media, which I'm included. I don't trust any of the media outlets. Yeah. Trust us. Why should you trust us either? Like I don't trust politicians. I don't trust the media. I feel like I'm getting half the story. And I don't think that I think that we're making our society worse by doing that, by not being transparent, by not, honoring our pros and cons. I think that we are making the situation worse and worse and worse, and we are making ourselves more and more polarized because we're not wanting to do that. And I'm naive enough to think, I guess where I'm kind of going with all of this is that I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be the change. Like, am I naive enough to think I'm going to change the world? No. But can I change my personal space? Maybe. Like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to participate in the problem anymore. I don't want to participate in polar opposites. I don't want to participate in pretending like we have the answers. I want to be a person who's like asking the questions and volunteering. Okay, here's the pros and the cons. And, I'm never going to run for any type of office. But if I did, if I had $1 million right here, I promise you I would not run commercials that point out everything that is wrong with you.
Because it'd be a waste of money.
Because there's nothing wrong with you.
Exactly.
Because you're perfect.
Exactly. The great Son Edom.
So
Remember, you came up with that.
Against the great Son Edom because it would save me thousands of dollars in advertising.
And then you could just promote
and myself.
Everything
how great
good
I
about
am.
you. Exactly.
Yes,
See, now you're catching on.
There we go. See, so that's my naive thinking that I'm so frustrated and I'm so we have to think. We've talked multiple shows about how do we roll during the day? How do we make our decisions? What is our core about? This is what keeps me awake.
Okay, so how are you going to change?
I am going to start asking questions. I'm going to give less opinions because we have had multiple shows where you say to me, well, what do you think? Well, why do you think people do that? And I jump on that bandwagon because I'm like,
why do you think you do that?
Because I'm academic. Shut up. Because I love academics. I love information. I love solving a problem. And so I fall into that. Like, okay, I have to, and yes, there are answers and that we need to come up with answers, but I don't want to be another talking head.
Okay, yeah,
that's an expert. That's like, I have the answers and you should listen to me. No, you should ask the questions.
But we do have experiences because, we talk about stuff we go through so they don't have to. So we do have experiences that others might not have gone through yet, or they might be going through that you could share. So, it might not be the answer, the finite answer to something, but it could be an answer to somebody's question of how did she go through?
Right.
Because, one of the things we've talked about in the past is, you had a hard time of dealing with things like, being approved.
Yes.
So, and the work you do is being approved and accepted as something good. And so there's people out there that could be going through the same thing, and you've come a long way. Now, I don't know if that journey is complete or not. Only you can answer that.
No.
But you've come a long way, and you've taken steps. and you've done things to get to where you are now. Okay. And you've been on that ledge. And so there's people out there that might want to look to you for an answer that you could provide to them because you've been through that. Now, I could offer an opinion, but I've never been through that. So you would be one that would have an answer. So I think there's
I think the answer, yes, I agree with everything that you're saying because you are the great Son Edom. And so, but I think the answer is the pros and the cons. I think the answer is not coming at it from an expert place, but saying, this is my experience. These are the pros. These are the good things, the good decisions maybe that I made and it worked out this way. These are the bad decisions that I made and it worked out this way. And this is what I learned from those bad decisions. And then being honest about, I do struggle with getting stuck. I do struggle with procrastination. I am in my head all the time and I have a hard time getting out of my head. That is the downside of Tara.
Well, I mean, and then you go back to, the abortion thing real quick. I mean, I would like to hear, I never really do hear, but I'd like to hear people who have actually been through that and had it talk. But yet they're muffled because there might be stigma.
Yes.
Or they might be ostracized, or the other side that is for abortion shuts them down because they don't want to be put in a light.
Exactly.
And so again, that's kind of what you're dealing with.
Because that's what I feel like. They don't want
Of course not.
To hear the other side. They don't want to hear that women have actually struggled from an abortion or have had health issues. It's like they say, like the two sides, like we fight, like, one side will say abortion is fine. The other side will say, no, abortion is not fine. Okay. Well, let's find out. Let's ask and be honest enough to let women talk. I've always wanted to be like, okay, if you've had an abortion, whatever your experience is, send me an email and let me sift through it and let me go through and see what the trends are and see what that's okay. So here you go. If you
want to share.
If you want to share and help me out here and finding out, some real answers, send me your story. Tell me, like, I don't know why we have to have, well, I do know why, because it's money. It's advertising, it's money, it's dollars. And if people are having bad experiences with abortions, then they're not going to get the funding that they want and whatever. It just hurts our society. It's hurting all of us.
Let's take something less controversial, still controversial, climate change.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Al Gore is a big proponent of climate change, plus other people, but let's just use him because he seems to be the champion. And he's made a ton of money, according to several news reports and stuff. Okay. If we want to believe that through the years, off of climate change. Okay. There's also times where climate change has failed, like Solyndra, whatever that natural energy thing that we did one time. And so, again, there's the bad thing. And so you got both sides out, but you got an underlying root cause of money involved,
Right.
And so again, we have to, I think, go back to, now, so then get back to climate change. So I don't get tangential here. Let me finish my thought. So we have this dividing line. You're either for climate change or against it. And you can't be both.
Right.
Now, if you're for climate change and you're making millions of dollars off of it because we should buy a $20 light bulb that lasts 100 years or a 97-cent incandescent light that lasts a few months, so we're taking both sides. But why can't there be a combination of both? Why can't we have the realization that, we need to treat the planet the right way, but we need to go about it in a manner that is appropriate. So, for example, we all have to pay in California, I don't know where you're at, it's 10 cents a bag. Well, then they decided to get rid of plastic bags, because it's killing the sea turtles. So now through this pandemic, they realized that the reusable bags are no good because you could be bringing COVID into the stores. So now they've gone back to plastic bags. So now we're back to killing the sea turtles and paying 10 cents.
And no, well, the ones down here are free. They're because we're in the pandemic.
Wow, yeah.
They went to free. And the real irony is, which I do not understand at all. So when we started off with the plastic bags, first they were thin.
Yes.
Right? They were the thin ones. So when the kids were growing up, they were thin and I used them for their lunches. I used them for trash can liners in the house. I reuse them all the time. I mean, this is I don't have to worry about lunch boxes coming home. I just pack their lunch in this, this thin bag. They can throw it away. Done. End of story. Then, like you said, the grocery store says, they're bad for the sea turtles. We're not going to do plastic bags anymore. So they got rid of them completely. The part that you skipped is that then they came back with the plastic bag that was thicker and heavier because their excuse was, you can reuse. And I'm like, well, I've reused the other ones.
Right.
Why does it have to be thicker in order to reuse it? So they brought it back, and then I'm thinking to myself, okay, wait a second. If the thin one is hurting the sea turtles and it's not degrading, right? Biodegrading. It's
Right.
like staying around forever. If the bag is thicker, wouldn't that make the problem worse? Like, wouldn't they be around even longer? Then, because they were like these heavy duty plastic
I know what
things.
you're talking about. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then COVID came and they got rid of them again. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then now they brought them back because, like you said, the reusables are people bringing in germs. Now they're back. Now we're back to the thin ones again.
Yeah, now we're killing turtles again.
And now how does this even make, like, I don't even,
And that's the thing.
it's stupid.
And so that's the thing where people just jump on a side without truly thinking about it,
Yes.
and you don't really think about the irony of, okay, here's an example. I went to Staples one time, a Staples Center, the one that actually sells staples. And,
the actual, like, convention center.
No, the store, the office supply store,
okay.
not the convention center, not the arena, the actual store that sells
We're
the
in
office
LA, so I
supplies.
had to
Yeah. Staples Center is the basketball arena downtown LA.
Okay, so you went to
I
the
went to the
office
actual
supply
office
store.
supply store.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've ever been, but you sometimes get these ridiculously long receipts.
Yes.
Okay. So I bought a couple of products, I forget what it was for, probably about a few. And so the lady looks at me and says, we're trying to save the environment. Is it okay if we email you your receipt? I'm like, sure, absolutely. Why not? So she emails me my receipt and proceeds to put all my stuff in a plastic bag.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I said, I thought you were trying to save the environment. She's like, oh, we are. I'm like, well, you just gave me a plastic bag. Are we killing sea turtles with these? And this was about the time that we were doing this thing. And she looked at me dumbfounded. And I'm like, okay. I mean, whatever. I didn't have to pay 10 cents, thank God. But that was the thing. It's like the irony was we want to save the environment was her
Right.
exact words.
Right.
So I don't want a paper receipt. But then you're handing me a plastic bag.
I know. And the bags are now, pre-COVID, that whole thin plastic, thick plastic, no plastic, that whole thing, there were 10 cents the whole time, thinking that if we had to pay for them, then we'd use as many, but that's, and now they're free. Now they're back to free again.
Well, I don't know. I paid 10 cents the other day and I complained about it and they looked at me funny like, your mask is not on properly.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're to that. Let's change the topic.
Yeah. And then that story really quick that I told you a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of shows ago, this lady was like giving me the stink eye.
Right.
Because I had straws in my shopping basket.
Oh, yeah. See, that's bad.
At Ralph's. And she said something about that I shouldn't be buying those, or straws are bad for the environment, whatever. And I looked in her shopping cart, and every product that she had in her shopping cart, like laundry detergent and dish soap and whatever it was, every product was in a plastic container. And I'm just like, okay, I'm confused.
But see, I think that's why it becomes an agenda-driven thing, and I think people have a hard time. I honestly do believe, and this isn't really a knock, but I honestly see a trend of where people want to be told what to do and how to do it.
Yeah.
They don't really have the ability to kind of think critically of their own.
I think we're afraid to think critically
Could be.
because if we start asking questions like I did, then we're going to get feedback. And it's like, oh, well, how can you be a Christian and not be, which I am pro-life, but how can you be a Christian and be, vote, Democrat is the question. Or how can you think, if you believe this, how can you think, that? And so people are afraid of that conversation because we don't know how to have it, because we're so polarized. And you're right. I think we don't know how to look for information. And then I think we're afraid to.
Because when I do research on a topic, I'll hear something in the news or see something on social media, and the first thing I do is go look at alternate sources on the internet, not the mainstream media headlines. I go deep diving into some things. And then I realize, okay, maybe this is true, maybe this isn't true. And so I, again, maybe the academic in me goes and chooses to, for example, I looked up, and I don't want to get in this conversation, but everybody was talking about Native Americans. And so my thought was, well, who's a Native American and how'd they get here? And then I did some research and I found out that there may not be a true Native American because they might have migrated from some other places based on a lot of academic papers of people that did research on migration. Okay. And so it's a big, long thing that we don't have to get into. But it got me thinking, okay, what is a Native American and where did they come from? And so then I started to see, well, Leif Erikson was a Viking. He came here and he was here in the Americas somewhere, maybe Greenland or the, Nova Scotia or whatever, 500 years before Christopher Columbus. And then you realize Christopher Columbus never even set land on what is now the United States. He was more the Caribbean and stuff. So you start learning all these things, that we may have learned or may not have forgotten, but you have to do the deep dive to get the knowledge is my point. And so then when you start to understand things from that perspective, maybe it starts to change your thinking instead of just jumping on a side because you hear it on the news or because you see it in social media. And it takes work is the point. It takes work.
A lot of work because
and people don't want to do that.
No. And there's a lot of agendas. It takes time to find out, the outlets that are more objective and where you can get the truth. And it's hard to find. I know the Atlantic is better at it. The Washington Post, I think, is better at it. But there's a lot of places that have their agenda. Mm-hmm. And so we can't trust what we're hearing because, again, they're telling all the good of their side, all the bad of the other side. There's no acknowledgement of personal cons, and there's no acknowledgement of the other side's pros. So how do we learn, as people, how do we learn anything and how do we trust anything and how do we get to the point where we can because I think that's part of all the fighting that is going on is that we're hearing, back to us, running for president against each other again. They're hearing, I'm telling, they're not going to vote for you. They'll vote for me. I'm telling everything that's positive about me and everything that's horrible about you. But neither one of those stories are true. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not a good assessment of everything that's good about me, nor am I a good assessment of everything that's bad about you. Like, so I feel like we're making each other dumb.
Yeah.
I really feel like we're making each other dumb because then it's like, well, where do you go for the right information and how do you find the right information? And because we're not willing to ask the questions and to be brave enough to say the pros and cons. So you asked me, like, what would I do? Like, I'm going to start in that space, like, because it just makes me, I get so anxious.
See, I think a long time ago, of course it was a long time ago, but you take a look at the philosophers, Plato, mm-hmm. Not Pluto, although Pluto the dog is pretty philosophical. Plato, Aristotle, all those guys, they would sit around and that's what they would do. They would dialogue. Mm-hmm. They would talk. They'd pontificate. Mm-hmm. They would think, ask questions.
To pontificate.
Yes. And they'd ask questions and they'd do stuff like that to try to find truth.
Yeah.
You think about, the drug-induced era of the 60s. People were seeking truth through their, they'd drop acid or drugs and then they would sit there and they'd pontificate. Yeah, they'd be like, but there was a search for it. Okay, whether or not that's the correct way of doing it's another story. But they're searching for truth. I don't think we do that anymore. I don't think we search for truth. We don't search for. We just want to be given and told, and then go accordingly. Mm-hmm. So again, quickly with the mask. Okay, there's truth to being a pro-mask, and there's truth to being anti-mask. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're starting to see now that reports, if they're true, that some of the testing is all convoluted, and there's a lot of error in reporting. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's coming out on all different kinds of media outlets. And so again, what information are we getting and what information are we making decisions based upon? And are we just being told, or are we going to seek the truth? Are we going to seek what it is? And we're in such an instant gratification society that we want it now and we want it our way. I think there's even a fast food joint, your way, right away, mm-hmm. And that's what we live in, and I remember you did the bad hair, don't care, vulnerability, no makeup videos for a long time. And that was so, antithetical to, what Instagram and all that is, because it's like we got glam up and this is our glam life,
Right.
And so you're putting this other out there.
Before hair and makeup.
Yeah. Before hair and makeup. And I thought, dude, that's kind of, unique because it's something different that it's not, it's the antithesis is what I meant to say. Yeah. It's the antithesis of what that purpose is. Mm-hmm. And so there then, there's the vulnerability and everything that comes with it. And so I think it's going to just, from listening to what you're saying and what I'm getting, is just going to have to be, you just have to be you and go about doing you. And then maybe by doing you, other people will see that and realize, oh, I can do me too. Mm-hmm. Because, in high school, there was a lot of times I was a loner because I didn't go along with the in crowd or the crowd because I just didn't see the need for it. You know, I made my own decisions. There's been times where through work I've lost jobs because I felt convicted to do something a certain way and I wasn't going to do it their way, you know, and I wasn't going to sell out. There's other times where things have come together, and I think most people would think that I'm actually an individualist more than anything else. Like to do things a certain way, and I like to seek it and find it and do it if I think it's the right way and not just a way because everyone says it to do it that way. But I think it takes effort, it takes time, and it takes energy to seek the truth, so to speak, like the old time philosophers did. And people don't want to have that, you know. I mean, some of the biggest conversations that I ever had were at the bar, you know, drinking beer, where we sit there and we're just talking, you know. And
and I told you some of the biggest conversations I've had was at the porn convention.
Right. And that's where it gets real because you take the judgments out of it.
That's right.
You know, you take the judgments.
You're already naked, so I wasn't naked, by the way, but
no, that would be, although you did have that bikini picture on the Instagram one time, scandalous.
It was not scandalous.
Follow her. No, but that's the thing is, you know, we take away the judgments of things. We take away what are preconceived ideas and notions, and we have a conversation, and we have to be open, and we have to be able to, but it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of willingness. I had a student one time, DACA student, tell me her whole story about why this, why that, and we had a conversation, and it went very well. I still disagree with a lot of her opinions and views, but she comes from it from a different perspective. You know, she's a DACA student and she's trying to get, you know, become a citizen, you know, and I'm like, well, you know, get in line. And there's no line. And you go back and forth, right? Okay. Now I'm just kidding about the line part, but that's the initial response, you know, get in line, right? Well, there's no line. Well, there's this, there's that, whatever. There was another student one time that didn't want to support Chick-fil-A because of what they stood for and their Christian values, but she drove a VW. And I'm like, oh, so you support Hitler and killing Jews? And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, VW was Hitler's car, is the, you know, Volkswagen, the people's wagon. And she's like, well, I didn't know that. And so then we had you know, an understanding, and we started talking about things and dialogue and stuff. And some of those conversations, even though we have different ideology, we had good conversations, much like you had on your post. But that's because they wanted to. People don't want that nowadays, I don't think. And so it becomes harder, and it's going to be harder for you to try to find that. But like we've mentioned before, like Michael Jackson saying, it starts with the person in the mirror. And so you've got to do you. And if that's what you want to do, then you need to go do it.
Yeah. And
But I caution you to not dismiss your experience, because you may have an answer for somebody else's situation that they could benefit from, and you can use that to help them, both the good and the bad, the pro and the con of your experience. So I wouldn't fully dismiss the fact that you might be an authority on a certain topic or a certain thing, because, you know, you mentioned the porn conventions. You might know what those people are going through and the behind the scenes.
Right.
When the consumer only sees what's on TV, the good, the pleasure. So for you to sit up and say, hey, you shouldn't watch pornography because this is what the people behind the scenes go through, well, I think that'd be valuable information that people would want to know, and you would have the answer.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I'm not saying that I don't have anything valid or helpful to say. It's kind of a note to self that I don't want to fall into that paradigm that is going on in our society that we have to come across as an expert. There's a lot of programs that entrepreneurs can do, like, oh, we'll teach you how to have success. We'll teach you how to have all these. They don't teach you how to have integrity. They teach you how to market in a way that you get a lot of clicks and a lot of responses and maybe, you know, make some money, but they're not teaching you how to really engage in a conversation in a way that's helpful by saying, here are the pros and here are the cons, and let's think about this and let's bring everybody to the table. And I think that, so it's not that I don't have any answers. It's not that, I mean, I have tons of experience in mental illness. I have tons of experience, not tons, but I have experience in the porn, industry, the sex industry. I've, you know, volunteered and gone to some things. And so I do have some experience there. I'm a mom. I'm, you know, a wife. Like, there's tons of, you know, I suffer with depression. So there's all kinds of things that I have experience to that I can be helpful in. I just want to make sure, note to self, that I don't come off as like, okay, I have all of the answers. Because I don't, I'm still seeking for those answers. So as long as I'm humble enough to say, yeah, this is my experience. These are the pros, these are the cons. Then I think I'm okay, in a space, and I'm coming around to the fact that I need to be brave enough to do that and to start asking questions and maybe, bring other people along and give them a safe space as well, because if I see this and it makes me crazy, and then I participate in it, just with our podcast, there's been podcasts I told you that I listened to an episode not too long ago, and I told you this morning, I'm like, I hated it. I didn't like listening to myself because I was sounding like I had the answers, that I was more right, than other people, and I was trying to not necessarily win the argument, but we just have this feeling like we have to be right. We have to be, we have to walk away satisfied, like, okay, I was, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that kind. I don't want to be a talking head. I don't want to be the kind of person that goes around and gives answers everywhere. I want to give people a safe space to chew on it, and let's see what the best answer is. And let's talk about, Trump he says a lot of, he's done some good things, but he says a lot of horrible things. Let's put those two together, and let's not ignore one side of him or the other, or let's not just say abortion is wrong, I'm going to vote for abortion, and then walk away and never even consider, maybe I should adopt a baby, or maybe I should help them financially, or maybe I should find a woman who's struggling and come alongside of her. It's just, don't do it and then walk away. And that's not okay. It doesn't get us anywhere as a society.
Well, I think we've talked about it too, where there's 2 to 3 sides to every story.
Yes.
There's this side, that side, the truth. There's the right side, the wrong side, And so anyways, you have to, in this particular instance, realize that to everything, there's pros and cons. There's nothing that's going to be perfect. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that's going to be only right. Mm-hmm. And so, we have to realize that, people aren't perfect. Society isn't perfect. Jobs, aren't perfect. Ideology isn't perfect. Nothing is perfect. And so we have to realize that. And if we come to the realization that, okay, we have to approach this with both the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, the right, the wrong, and we approach it that way, it might be better for understanding. Mm-hmm. Because that's all people are. And I think there's a lot of people that are looking for a third, I don't want to say third party as in politics, but a third outlet, a third way of thinking, a third option maybe, because they're tired of option 1 and 2. They're tired of this or that. Why can't it be both?
And we feel like we don't fit in, and then we're depressed, and we feel isolated, and then it's like, okay, I don't have a voice, and what do I do? And then, I can't talk about this because people are going to attack me. Like, we need a safe third option, a safe place. And so that's my goal, is to kind of move in that direction. Yeah,
and I think people would find that more refreshing, like the post that you posted, and maybe dialogue and conversation. But again, it comes down to that the biggest uphill battle is the divide in this country, and everybody takes a side, and they cling to that side, and they put their roots in that side, and they're not going to budge. And that's the thing that I think becomes frustrating, and that you have to try to overcome. And, it might take a little bit of work, but if you start with your circle, your inner circle, we talked about it with, I think it was racism or any other thing. You don't want to fix the problem on the grand scheme. You want to fix it locally. Start with the local, your friends, your family, the community, and then it starts to grow. And that might be a way of approaching it. So, for you, maybe if you started that perspective in just conversations around your social circles, and then maybe it goes from there. And I used to use the PERT reference, and so on, or Pantene, whatever it was, and then the screen, would multiply, but nobody knows that reference anymore.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, it starts to spread and starts to grow. And, it starts with you. You got to be the change that you want to be, and anybody has to be the change they want to be. And it starts with you, starts with me, starts with us. And why not do it?
Yeah. So that is my what I am going to bring to the table in our podcasts, I think, from here on out, is just a little more humility, a little more asking questions, a little more investigating, listing out the pros and cons of things, and inviting other people to join in that.
Although there is one thing that is absolute.
What? That you are the great Son Edom.
I am great.
I have to earn my keep, so that's why I say that several times a podcast.
But because we're transparent, she came up with that.
I did.
Not me.
I did.
So,
I may have been being facetious at the time.
No. You weren't. You were sincere. I saw it in your eyes. The sincerity when you said, "Oh, look at this shirt I made, the great Son Edom." So
okay.
Hey, so
we'll just leave it there.
We are a Two Steps Ahead podcast, highlighting the stuff we've stepped in. And so hopefully this podcast has been helpful. And again, you can reach out. You mentioned earlier real quick, maybe people reaching out to you. I know sometimes, Instagram direct messaging might not be the best way. Is there an email or something you feel comfortable giving out, or a way that people can get a hold of you through your website?
There is a link on my website to contact me. So TaraShiro.com. If you go to my Instagram at Tara Hoke Shiro, there are links there, link in the bio to get to my website. So you can DM me. You can reach out to me on social media, Facebook, through my website. And so if you feel like you have a story that is, that you want to be heard, maybe not necessarily with your name and your story, but you just want to put it into the record or talk to somebody, let me know, reach out, because I would love to hear what you have to say. Because
that is one thing, you say we get our information from the news, from the top down.
Let's get it from real people.
If we start talking to real people, we might get the true story.
Exactly.
And that's one of the beautiful things about, for me, social media, reaching out with people across the globe, is like, I know there's a bunch of stuff going off in Hong Kong. Well, I have a couple people that I connect with on Instagram, and I've been able to kind of get the real story of what's going on the streets of Hong Kong from them. And I don't really know them except through social media. So if we start getting information from the real people and not necessarily the news that's agenda driven, maybe we can start to affect that change and change the narrative to more truth seeking and realizing there's pros and cons,
right?
Versus just going with the status quo. And if you want to tell me how great I am, you can reach me at my Instagram, Edem Rocks, EIDEM ROCKS. You can DM me night and day how great I am.
Yeah,
I do not discriminate.
He needs that.
And then also, there's a link at Two Steps Ahead podcast, Instagram, and also my Instagram, where if you go to the link in the bio, it takes you to a lot of options. The options are the same on mine and on Two Steps Ahead. You can watch us on YouTube. You can check us out on Pandora, Spotify. There's links there. There's also a swag shop where you can go and get merchandise. And that continues to grow every day and every week. So you can keep looking back. If there's something you might not see this time, maybe next time, because Tara's putting that together and she's doing a great job. And so, she's adding things to it. So there's the swag shop there. But everything you need to know is just the link in the bio for at Two Steps Ahead podcast or at Edem Rocks. And you can find everything you need. And worst case scenario, just go to Google and type in Two Steps Ahead podcast, TWO, and we pop up. And so with that, we say thanks for listening. Do tell a friend, take your passion, make it happen, let yourself be great, be kind, and don't be an a-hole. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.